According to that theory, Gull and the Prince rode through Whitechapel in a coach and sought out Mary Kelly and the 4 other prostitutes. They mutilated the bodies and lay them on the street to be found by the police. The most recent theory involves a brilliant but strange young man, J.K. Stephen. He was hired as a tutor for Prince Eddie.
The royal family had no idea about that J.K. Stephen was a homosexual and had personal problems. And they developed a very strong relationship between them. Very strong.
When the prince became engaged to Mary, an infuriated Stephen went on a murderous rampage of prostitutes, with Prince Eddie as his lookout.
J.K. Stephen, who I think was Jack the Ripper, was a loner to some extent. But he was more than a lust murder. He really wanted to kill the woman piece by piece.
If any of these theories are true, there was a cover-up of majestic proportions. That the heir to the English throne was either an accomplice to the Ripper murders or Jack the Ripper himself is the stuff of bestsellers and television movies. A few years ago, a diary surfaced that has caused much debate and great excitement. James Maybrick supposedly wrote that he committed the Ripper murders.
James Maybrick was a Liverpool cotton merchant who died in 1889 and whose wife was convicted on very dubious evidence of having poisoned him. A journal turned up in Liverpool in 1992 which purported to be Maybrick's and to be a confession that he was Jack the Ripper. Very few of us believe it. The diary is not in Maybrick's handwriting. There is internal evidence to suggest that it is not a genuine piece of work with knowledge of the murders, and an examination of the inks appears likely to show in the long run that it is definitely a modern forgery.
He fails in too many ways. He just fails the test. But again, it's one of those tantalizing, every time you hear something new and you hear about a new possibility, you jump at it hoping, this is the one. We're going to find out who he was.
I think there is evidence about, but people don't always realise whether they've got, simply because the legends are taken over. The films blur the issue. I mean, I've been astonished at the number of people, for instance, they look at the Michael Caine film, Jack the Ripper, and say, oh, the mystery solved. It's not. I mean, the whole thing, about 99% of it is fiction. But for a lot of people, that's the solution to the case. So, therefore, if they do come across evidence, if they do come across documentation, they're not going to put it forward because they think the mystery has been solved. It hasn't. And that's one of the things we need to sort of get over, that we are still looking for the identity of Jack the Ripper.
Nobody really knew what was within him. Nobody knew what he was thinking, nobody knew his feelings. And at the same time also, he was afraid that he might be discovered, which was one reason as to why he couldn't be found.
There is a brand new suspect for Jack the Ripper, the Phantom of Death, who terrorized London more than 100 years ago. He is an Irish-American outlaw who outfoxed Scotland Yard in London and New York.
This American was at large in London at the time of the murders. The police were seeking him at the height of the murders. He was arrested after the Miller's Court murder, at which time, of course, the murders ceased. He escaped from England in early December 1888 and got back to America and was never arrested by Scotland Yard, despite the fact that they sent a team of detectives to America to try and catch him.
A letter with an undisputed provenance is the source of this new information. The letter in question was written in 1913 by Chief Inspector John Littlechild of Scotland Yard to fellow criminologist George Sims.
To Littlechild's mind, he thought that this man could well be Jack the Ripper, and he's American, he's genuine, and we've got documentary evidence of his flight to America.
Self-proclaimed Dr. Francis Tumulty is more than likely the subject described by Littlechild.
Dr. Francis Tumblety, who was arrested in London 6 weeks ago on suspicion of being the Whitechapel murderer, arrived here by the steamship Britannia on Sunday under an assumed name, Dr. Frank Townsend.
Detectives were waiting for him on the dock, and they tailed him to an East 10th Street lodging house.
It is not known exactly when the doctor eluded his watchers. His landlady found his room empty. A half-open valise on the chair and a big pair of English cavalry boots were all that remained to tell the story of Dr. Tumblety's flight.
Tumblety used many aliases. He may well have chosen the name Blackburn to purposely align himself with an infamous Dr. Luke Blackburn, a staunch Confederate and instigator of nefarious plots during the time of the Civil War.
Dr. Tumblety, alias Blackburn, the person who was arrested in London a week ago as Jack the Ripper, was a well-known character in Brooklyn many years ago. In the 60s, he used to walk down the street in his uniform, accompanied by a big dog.
April the 16th, 1865. President Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. Tumblety, possibly mistaken as the infamous Confederate Dr. Luke Blackburn, was arrested. This was the report Colonel Baker gave Washington about their prisoner.
All his papers were examined. He has gained an extensive notoriety as an impostor and quack, but nothing was found in them lending to implicate him with the assassination.
Within a few weeks, he was released.
Washington, D.C., May 26, 1865. To the Honorable E.M. Stanton, Secretary of War. Sir, I have the honor to recommend the release from custody of F. Tumblety, prisoner now at the Old Capitol. Very respectfully yours, H.G. Burnett, Provost, Colonel, and Judge Advocate.
Tumblety wrote in one of his 3 published books, "I am the most well-known person in the entire city of Washington." Who exactly was the man who kept an entire city in mortal fear, and the rest of the world on pins and needles waiting for his capture, waiting for a name to be put to him?
Serial killing is certainly as old as human society is. When you have a form of behavior that is so connected to the intimate details of childhood and family upbringing, so for as long as there have been children and families, there have probably been these kind of characters.
Jack the Ripper, the Phantom of Death. We don't really know who he was. We may never know, but we will speculate and wonder for another 100 years.
Jack the Ripper is dead. Jack the Ripper is dead. He's lying in his bed. He cut his up with sunshine soap. Jack the Ripper is dead.
Today, as children in East London sing about Jack the Ripper, the question of who Jack the Ripper was still intrigues and baffles. There's no telling if this unsolved mystery will ever be solved.